Good morning, everyone. Hopping on for another great live with Nikita. That was quick. He's already on when push comes to shove.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been kind of starting off the conversation with people the last few lives I've done because I just been finding the story so fascinating of how everyone has ended up in birth work. For some people, it was a calling right from early on from childhood. Others, like myself, and when I was talking to Dr. Stu, even Billy Harrigan, it was kind of by chance. I was an indoctrinated NICU nurse that, the veil was lifted. Dr. Stu's story was super interesting, how he kind of ended up one direction and just kind of kept being led. And here he is being this very loud voice about breech and home birth. And so, yeah, I would love to hear your story. How did you end up doing the work that you do?
Well, I was always obsessed with pregnancy and birth, even as a child. I used to put a cycling helmet up my top to look pregnant. It was when my aunt was pregnant with my cousin. I was about 10. I was like really interested in it, but I didn't feel a calling until I had my first baby, which was 16 years ago. And I had a very, very traumatic birth. I thought of it every day. I felt broken. I felt that my body had failed me, and I'm sure many of you watching this will resonate with this. It was the normal bollocks. You're overdue. You've got to be induced, and I handed my body over without question. Whoops.
Yeah.
So I had this awful birth with a beautiful baby who introduced me to myself and what I was capable of. And I was speaking to my grandmother, and she'd done this 7 times. And I thought, the woman's mad. How has she gone through this so many times? So I spoke to her and I said, Nanny, how can you do something 7 times when this trauma is so normal? And she said something that changed my world. She said, my darling, what you experience is not normal, it's common. And that really did something to me. So I began my obsession with understanding what had happened to me and how to prevent this from happening to others. I found there was such black and white. Well, you either have a hospitalized, like medical birth, or you have a home birth, and it's just this black and white stuff. And I thought, well, no, this is about choice, an informed choice. Like I'm no fan in telling anyone how to give birth. It's none of my business. It's not my journey. But what I am really passionate about is choice and making informed decisions. Mm-hmm. So I started my journey in midwifery, and in the UK, it's just obstetric nursing. It's not midwifery, not that I've seen in a long time. So I stopped that very, very quickly. And then I got into the flow of learning more ancient birth wisdom from unconventional sources. And it kind of evolved. And I did doula training. That didn't really resonate with me because it seemed to be quite bureaucratic there as well. Lots of, I don't know, I felt like a lot of empire building, a lot of judgment. It didn't seem nice and safe. But I found my own path. I found the right people. And then in 2020, I had my second baby, and she was born into my arms at home in my living room, with no one telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And that again, she introduced me to the next part of me, and independent midwives who I have a great deal of respect for in the UK. So just to let you know, in the UK, the midwives are governed by the NNC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council. Independent midwives are too, but they seem to be with women rather than with system. And they lost their insurance. And I thought, oh God, that's it. That's like, what now? And I never set out to do what I'm doing now, but all I wanted to do was give women a voice, and just have conversations. Like, you do know you have rights. Yeah, you do know you can decline interventions. And the first thing I found was, well, women were saying, well, why would I decline an intervention? It's clearly needed. To which people didn't really understand that maternity care in the UK, certainly, is only 8% category A evidence based. So when you're being told you have to do this, that, and the other, the likelihood is it's based on no evidence whatsoever. And even still, if you look at the evidence, my old mentor, Beverly Beach, she's an incredible woman in birth advocacy. She said she had an argument with an obstetrician, and he was trying to tell her that there's nothing she can't tell him about birth that he doesn't already know. And she made a really good point. She said, you can't understand the behavior of birds by observing them in a zoo. And that was so poignant, because if you look at the studies, where do they take place? So they're under scientific conditions, where women are observed. They hear beeping machines. They have strangers in the room. So I think it's like almost an illusion of control. We don't have control over birth. Birth is birth. You can put your little beeping machines on and your CTGs and have an illusion of control. But birth unfolds how it unfolds. And I'm not here to say birth is inherently safe, because I don't believe it is. But I certainly don't believe it's inherently dangerous. I think we have an obsession with a black and white view, and with an attachment to an outcome. But I'm here to say, well, why don't we educate ourselves? And more importantly, and this is the level I'm really focusing on when push comes to shove, it's going inside. Because if we get in our own way, in our heads all the time, it causes suffering. But women need to have that connection again with their deep wisdom, with that deep divine connection within. But anyway, that's how When Push Comes to Shove started. And now I'm really proud to say we've trained about 140 women in 10 countries. And we're the only decentralized maternity structure that I'm aware of. So yeah, really, that's me. That's my journey.
Yeah. It's really incredible to see what you have created and how it's grown in, I feel, such a short period of time. So I think it's, it's amazing. I don't know, our children come into our lives for a reason. And I think the journeys and the teachings and the lessons they give us are just so profound, more than we're ever ready for or can imagine. It's like, we know that, having a baby will change our lives, but I don't think we're ever ready for the profound impact it actually has on changing our complete trajectory in our lives when that happens. And hearing that a lot with with babies, I know that even from my own experience, like, it was my children that have completely, each one of them giving me a new lesson and complete, like, new shift into where I am now. And you mentioned a lot of important things, but I wrote down a few of them. And I think it's so important to get back to, that one statement. And I like to say that too, with health, with food, with how we birth, all these things, just because it's common does not make it normal. And I think what your grandmother said to you is so important, because we've somehow associated with, well, just because, like, well, this is what it looks like. And I know I did that working in that NICU. I thought, well, this is what birth is. This is what I saw. So this must be what birth is. And I think we need to get away from, just because it's common and what we see does not make it normal. How do we get back to changing the stories and the narrative? And that's a big part of what you're doing. That's a big part of Reclaiming Birth Conference, is getting back to all these actual, like, evidence and stories, and getting back to what normal looks like in away from common. And so I really love the mission that you're doing. And to get back into more of kind of what you're talking on, I listened to your lives, and when you spoke last year at when you zoomed in and spoke at last year's Reclaiming Birth Conference, you did speak to a lot of of coming inward and how we have to change our own perspective. And in what that looks like in moving forward in birth in our lives and taking that, you know, radical self-responsibility. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was you spoke on last year, but I know you continue to speak on it. It's instead of the blame or instead of being the outrage at, you know, this or that, it's like, how can we change that within ourselves and actually create the change we want to see outward, right? It has to be begin with us first. And I'd love for you to kind of touch more on the work that you're doing there and what you're seeing and how that's changing things moving forward.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and make it as simple as possible. I believe, forget the maternity system, any human behavior. I think we believe on a level of ego, and maybe before I carry on, I need to define ego. It's not about narcissism or anything like that. Ego is how we identify with our thoughts. That's it. So we have a story that has been created through often trauma, early childhood experiences, societal expectations. The ego is formed, and this story then perpetuates. And what we resist persists, essentially. So, for example, I've seen a lot of wonderful, well-meaning people within the freedom movement because they were in outrage after 2020. And I understand that. But the problem is they're trying to fix a problem from the same level of energy that created it. And that doesn't work. So when you look at these people in the freedom movement shouting out things like effing sheeple and idiots, and well, how does that help? That's not gentle or loving. I can understand they're angry, and to be honest, I think anger is a necessary component to this. You have to go through that. But what we end up doing as humans, we keep looking at outside stuff. We need external solutions. I went to a conference in London last year with my colleague, and I was asked to speak, and I was feeling lots of anger from a lot of midwives that there's bullying in midwifery and these policies are wrong and these guidelines are wrong. But what I couldn't help but notice was, but you keep focusing on external stuff, the bullying, the guidelines, but what I don't think they were quite seeing, and maybe I didn't explain it well enough, was what they're talking about are the roots, right? In order to change, the fruits. In order to change our fruits, we need to change our roots. You can't keep pulling weeds that just keep growing. So I believe we have almost like a spiritual malignancy, right? So we think we're separate. And all human suffering comes down to one thing. We think we've got loads of problems, but we've only got one, and that's a separation from ourself, our collective consciousness, God, whatever you prefer to say it is. And that makes us miss our divine wisdom. You know, the presence of intelligence, so your intellect without wisdom is really dangerous, because that makes midwives and doctors miss things. Well, this is textbook, so you don't know what you're talking about, and no, you're not in any danger. But the woman knows. It's wisdom. It's an internal knowing, and we all have that gift. But because we are so distracted up here with mainstream media, alternative media, drama within our lives, we keep repeating the same story over and over again because it's indoctrinated deep within us, and we are missing that inward knowing. And when you can go quiet, there's a little exercise I do when I'm giving talks about this. I get one half of the room to start screaming and shouting, and I get the other half of the room to just hum quietly, and then I get the hummers to carry on, and then I'll say stop to the one screaming and shouting, and I say, can you hear that hum? That's what you need to listen to, that quiet vibration, that lovely hum that's in deep within every single one of us. We keep scratching the surface, and you know, birth education is phenomenal, and it should never disappear, because women should have this knowledge, and it shouldn't be reserved for white coats. You have the right to understand the physiology of your birth and your body, but that alone is actually quite superficial, because if you give women knowledge, they're only going to rely on those outside things. We need to bridge the gap. We need to bring our intelligence down with our wisdom. That way, our compass, our inner compass, will navigate things for us with very little effort, I might add. And then that won't perpetuate this blame culture. You did this to me, so therefore you're making me feel like this. Now, I understand how people get to that point because I was there myself. I get it. It's trauma. And it's not trauma in the obvious way, like some horrific story. It's how our basic needs weren't met as children, right? Maybe we didn't feel heard, listened to, whatever it is. I'm sure many of you will know of Gabor Mate. I can't recommend him. I teach this on my course. So, excuse me, it's really important. In my course, the first module is about working on yourself, because we cannot have women attending other women in survival mode who are reacting instead of responding, who are not able to regulate their emotions, because that has an energy of fear and like attracts like. So my role, I believe, in birth is bridging the gaps. So many of us live in this 3D reality where it's linear. You know, I have to get a mortgage for 25 years in order to get a house that I own, or I have to go through these motions, get the degree, do this and that in order to mean anything. That's very 3D, that's very linear, yeah? And that is definitely a world of suffering. And then over here, you've got the 5D consciousness of letting go, swimming downstream, not having an attachment to an outcome, but pointing at your intentions. Waking up every morning saying to God, to the universe, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? You know, serving the world through love, and then letting go of an attachment to an outcome and just seeing where you're led instead of perpetuating the same story over and over again. But there needs to be a bridge, and it's a 4D bridge. I'd call it a 4D bridge. And we can't possibly get from 3D to 5D if we haven't healed our own traumas and started to look at our own wounds. You can't. There's so many beautiful books about, you know, manifesting or whatever word you want to use, but they're missing a big point. You can't do that when you're in survival mode, when your body's remembering before you've even remembered. Like, this isn't safe, you know, this means that this person's going to screw me over. I'm occupying a space of victim consciousness, and this always happens to me. We need to empower ourselves, and my job is to help women find their very own superpower. I am not interested in telling anyone how to give birth or where. That's not my journey. And also, if someone had done that to me, that would have taken a lot away from me, because I'm very glad I went through that experience, because it brought me to this. So you can't micromanage and helicopter what people are doing. Oh no, don't do that. That's, you know, that's dangerous. Don't go into a hospital, or don't have a home birth. One of the best interviews I've ever seen was with a woman who was 105 years old, and the interviewer asked her, what is the key to longevity? And she said, minding my own business. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant on all levels. You know, we should speak from our wisdom when we feel called to speak, but trying to manage what other people are doing, that's not my ball game. I just want to offer up information and say, hey, let's help you find your own superpower deep within, and the journey is yours.
Yeah. I just made like 2 pages of notes. Just everything you're saying is so spot on. And I can relate to this on so many levels, in birth, in the freedom movement, in life, in everything. And I'm like trying to pull it all together, because I'm like, this is it. And I know when I started speaking out in 2020 about everything that was going on, I was going everywhere I could speak, international events, podcasts, doing everything, trying to blow the whistle, get it out there as big as I could. And I know many people out there were doing the same. And there was this like turning point in me where I had an opportunity to go to this, a bigger city to speak and get the message out, or I could stay in my hometown and do something smaller. And at first I was like, well, I need to go where the numbers are. I need to go speak to more people. And then it like switched to me. I was like, no, like I need to be in my own home, in my own backyard, and speak more intimate. And then from that, it got even smaller and smaller till I completely removed myself from it, because exactly what you're saying, it's like we can spread this message out far and wide, but if we aren't looking at the individual, nothing's going to change. And with laws, with rules, with regulations, that's why like politics and all this stuff doesn't matter, because it's a societal issue, it's a cultural issue. And if we don't look at it from the smaller roots, like you said, we're just going to keep pulling out that same weed. If we aren't changing the hearts first, then nothing's going to shift. And that's what I've kind of got back to, is like, well, we have to change our hearts, and that will change our homes, and then that will go into the hands of others in the ripple effect. But it has to start within us first, and then that's finding your own superpower without controlling, without micromanaging, without this. And this is a great lesson even for myself, because having been in the medical system, I'm completely jaded from it, want nothing to do with it, and my bias definitely comes out when I'm talking. But that's not the point. The point is giving the information and allowing women to have it all and to come into their own empowerment. And I've even shifted on things I've said, like years before I would have said, oh, we're here to empower you. And it's like, no one's here to do anything for anyone. We're not here to empower anyone. We can't empower anyone. The individual themselves has to find their own superpower and feel empowered in themselves. That can't come from anyone else. So I think the work that you are doing is unique, and probably the most important out there in helping women find their superpower and coming from their own place of knowing who they are. Because I think that's where everything is missing, is we no longer trust ourselves. We no longer trust our intuition. We don't have that spiritual connection. We are just so disconnected on all fronts. And I think that's the journey we need to get back to, is how do we connect back to inside, back to, the spiritual connection, back to trusting our bodies, back to trusting our internal voice, our maternal instincts, intuition. And that's where it needs to start. And I think that's the root of it all, like you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for a long time, I blamed my midwife, the doctor, for telling me I had to be induced when I didn't need to. But really, I didn't have to blame anyone. And it's not that I was blaming myself, but what I should have done was taking responsibility. I know that didn't feel right. I know that. So why didn't I do some more research? And I know why I didn't do more research, because I was occupying such a space of trauma that I had to be a good little handmaiden and do what I was told. I was too afraid to speak up. And that kind of liberated me, and I felt free. I thought, it's not the midwife's fault. It's not my fault, but I took responsibility. There's a big difference between blame and taking responsibility. Because when we do take responsibility, it's freeing. I wrote a blog yesterday, day before, and I entitled it, I'm Offended. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, because I put a post up a couple of months ago about the benefits of breastfeeding. I don't need to explain to you the benefits of breastfeeding. But sadly, I ended up inadvertently triggering quite a few mothers. You're shaming me. And I thought, well, I know I'm not doing that. That is not my intention. But I understand why they would think that through their lens of perception. So I wrote a blog to say, if you are doing the right thing and you have chosen the right thing, why would anyone offend you? If I told you right now, you don't know how to walk, you do know how to walk, you'd think, shut up. Of course I do.
But this is like everything you're saying is so important. But I did this as well. I didn't think I was putting my foot in my mouth. There was months ago, one of our politicians made a comment about how formula was so expensive and we need to intervene and subsidize the cost of formula. And I said something, well, breast milk is free, as is donor milk. And if we can help support women in understanding of breastfeeding, breast milk, and give them more postpartum support to help in their journey, this would alleviate some of those costs. And I said it a lot more articulate at the time, and I don't think I wasn't trying to do anything. I just was stating a fact. And same thing, did I ever trigger many? And the comments and the knives came out and everything. And it is very interesting what you're saying, because if you are confident in the decisions that you're making, you don't have that response. And I'm not here to shame, and I'm not here to trigger. I'm just stating facts that, you know, like breast milk is what is natural for our children. And of course, if that's not working, then we're going to find other means to, you know, nourish our babies. But I mean, that's not saying anything that's not factual. Anyways, continue on. So what you were saying is you did this, you got attacked, and you wrote this blog post about being offended.
Yeah. What I was trying to allude to in the most gentle way is that if we actually do the inner work on ourselves, we won't get, well, if we do get triggered, we can actually go through a process. So what I teach my students, I've actually named it the Stark method, because there's lots of different modalities, but I haven't seen anything that is exactly what I do. It's not linear. There's lots of fluid sort of modalities. So the first thing I tend to ask my students to do if they feel triggered, like if they've attended a birth, and I've had it a lot. Oh my God, I knew this would end up in a car crash birth, but she chose it anyway. And I'm like, hey, this is not about you. This is about her journey. So first of all, can you identify the emotion you're feeling? I know that sounds like a basic question, but many can't. Can you identify it? Let's say, for example, it's anxiety or dread. The next thing you say, where in your body do you feel it? That speaks volumes. So I will get all my feelings in my solar plexus, heart chakra sort of area. And that tells me a big story, because I know my trauma is associated with a lack of self-love. And of course, that will show up here. So where in your body do you feel it? Now, what we tend to do as humans, now this is a new modality, by the way. This is somatic, all right? But I incorporate it with lots of other modalities. So the first stage is somatic. When you actually sit with your feelings, many of us won't do it because we don't want the bad feelings. So we'll distract ourselves and move away from the bad feelings. But here's the thing. You would never want to lose your sense of touch, because if you did, you wouldn't know if something was too hot or too cold. Okay? We need our feelings, because when we sit with our feelings, it tells us what's not right, what isn't aligned. And people often come to me, I did a very short video about this today, saying, well, what about, you know, gut feeling? How do you know the difference? A gut feeling feels peaceful. Anxiety doesn't. There's a big difference. So when we can go underneath the feelings, that's our authenticity. That is our wisdom. Then we can go down a different path of, okay, where have I got this story from? Why am I offended? If it's not true, why does it bother me? Why am I needing external validation here? Why do I? This is the problem I see, the main problem in society at the moment. We constantly need external validation. And I'm not saying we have to remove it, but wouldn't it be more empowering if we knew who we were? Because often we just repeat scripts from our parents, from society. We don't even take a moment to actually think, do I believe this? What do I have to believe in order for this to be true? But we have a separation from each other. So when a human being is formed in the womb, that human being is full of millions and millions of cells. And all those cells are assigned jobs. You're a heart cell, you're a kidney cell, you're a lung cell. Now, what happens if one of those cells decides to go off and do its own thing? We call that cancer. We have a spiritual malignancy. The second you think you're separate from all of us, we may be in different bodies, but we share a consciousness. The second you think you're separate, that's where suffering begins. And we weren't put here to suffer. Our natural state of being is love. And I'm not talking about the emotion, I'm talking about the actual state of being. Now, you could watch this and think you're talking shit, Nikita, and that's fine. In fact, I encourage you, don't believe a word I say. I say this with all my courses, in anything I write. Don't believe anything I say. Don't take my word for it. What do you believe? Can you drop down here into that place of trust, into that knowing? Do your own research. The problem is, because we've been encouraged for the last few thousand years that all the answers are outside ourselves, be it a religion or be it I don't know, monetary things. I need the relationship to feel happy. I need this degree to make me feel happy. I need this house. I need this money, or whatever it is. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but we've got it kind of round the wrong way. If we go inside ourselves and know the feeling that we want to occupy, the rest comes. It's when we're stuck in this ego cycle of this script from our own trauma and our own wounds. And the idea is, if you teach people how to recognize others' trauma, you have empathy. And instead of judging that poor person, you have discernment. And there's a very big difference. So if you see someone stuck in victim consciousness, you can know where that's come from. That is familiar. People will cling on to what's familiar. And when you're a victim, I'm not talking about an actual victim, something's happened to them. I'm talking about the consciousness of the victim. Do you see the difference? When that, oh, this has happened to me again, typical. They are subconsciously doing that because it's familiar and it's comfortable. Because we don't like change. We need to know what's happening. This is just my belief, by the way. I am not saying this is true. It's just my belief and my observations. But I've noticed in people who are helicopters, they have to micromanage everything around them. I have to get other people to believe what I'm saying because then I can feel okay. That's clearly come from having to grow up too soon. Maybe. Like having to organize everything. I know I had that. I had to play chess in my head growing up because my childhood was not safe. And I know I had that savior complex from it as well. But when I started to do the inner work, it was so liberating. And I felt free. And I just had this phrase in my head, let them, let them, let them. That's it. Let them get on with it. Do you, and the world will do them. That's not to say you won't get triggered, and it's a bloody good thing when you get triggered. Because I do it all the time. I go, oh, do I actually believe this? Take a few deep breaths. Is this an old story of mine? Yeah. Can I let go of it? Maybe not. Maybe I need to do a bit more work there. It's liberating. But what it creates is oh, I can scroll past that. Or I don't have to react. I can respond. Or if you're in a conflict or a dialogue with someone that isn't particularly comfortable, if you act from here instead of letting your ego get in the way, guess what? Go downstream and you end up in that 5D consciousness that I was talking about earlier. I wrote a blog called From 3D to 5D Consciousness. If you look up Nikita Stark Substack, I write a lot of things like this to try and help people piece these things together. It's not just in birth, because if we don't heal these handmaiden wounds, we're screwed. We have to do better for our children and our grandchildren. We need to cut this generational trauma. It's enough. And we're lucky because if you look at our grandparents, right, they didn't have the luxury of doing this. They were literally in survival mode. You know, a war had just happened. They had to scratch around to survive. They didn't have time. They didn't even have the connections we do. You're in Canada right now and I'm sitting in London and we're chatting. How awesome is that, right? We have the connections with beautiful minded people all around the world at our fingertips. Our grandparents didn't have that. They didn't have time to sit around going, oh, I just need to look at my inner wounds. You know, they didn't have that, but we do. And we need to really embrace this and bask in the deliciousness that is our privilege right now. We can go inside and heal our wounds. We don't have to, but look what will happen. You will perpetuate the story, and your children will suffer if you don't take responsibility and go, enough's enough. I feel I'm ranting.
No, I'm loving every word that's coming out of your mouth. I'm like trying to like make notes so I can remember it for myself for later, but then also to try and come back in this conversation. Your rants are just beautiful, articulated, and so necessary right now. And I'm like thinking of all these things, in my life, like you said, even going back to birth, like bringing back the self-responsibility in the birth. Like I know that with my first baby, when people asked me if I was going to read books, if I was going to do anything, and I was like, no, like, why would I do that? I work in the NICU. I've seen birth. I know what it looks like. And plus I'm going to go in there and they'll just tell me what to do. So like I gave up my responsibility, like knowingly, like I said it, I was like, I'll just do what they tell me to do. And then coming back out of that, once the veil was lifted, and then I realized I was robbed of an experience, but I can't get mad at the system. I can't get mad at any of it, because going back to what you had said earlier, it was like, well, I didn't even take responsibility. Like I literally said, they'll just tell me what to do. So it's owning that and not blaming, like I said, myself, not blaming the system, but owning that responsibility of like, well, that was a gap in my knowledge that I have to own. But now that I know that, now I can make those changes moving forward, which I did for baby girl, because I realized, well, I need to know for myself. Like now it is up to me. And I think the most important thing that we can do is work on ourselves to get back to that place where we're not blaming and we're not seeking that external validation. And what you said is so important for so many levels with in the birth world for the mother, placing the expectations on the people in their realm, whether it's at home or in the hospital, to provide them with the birth that they want. And there's a lot of expectations that goes on to people, like whether it's a midwife, an OB, a nurse or something, and we have to stop seeking that, whether it's external validation, external responsibility, and placing expectations on others to create the experience that we want for ourselves. And I think that's so important for women, but also you mentioned in your course, like the birth workers as well, because there's a lot that we can hold on to there as well. Like, oh, well, this happened, or they didn't want this and it ended up in this situation. And you can feel angry or upset about that. But as a birth worker, sometimes we put too much expectation on the mother's experience or the birth, because we want them to have this experience, and we almost feel like, well, did we do something wrong, or maybe they didn't listen? And we can hold a lot as birth workers as well, when again, it's not up to us, and it's not our experience, and it's not our journey. And so there's a lot on both sides and in the world right now, where if we just came back to that self-responsibility and not placing expectations on others. And I talked to Dr. Elvin de Leon, who I love. He does German New Medicine, and now he's been doing for 15 years. He's completely released all expectations. He's like, when people come to me, he's like, I just trust that they come to me, and whatever unfolds is what it's supposed to happen. Their healing, their outcome has no weight on what I provided to them. I just have to trust everything unfolds how it should. And I think that's an important place to get to. And I was trying to think, there was one other thing that's what it was. The whole idea you mentioned of separating from ourselves. Like if you think that you are separated and not connected, that's where the suffering comes from. And speaking from a Christianity point of view, I've been reading this book, whereas we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and it talks about how great pain is. Thank God for pain is one of the opening chapters, and that's what you mentioned too, about the hot or cold, and we need feelings and we need pain, and we need to feel these things. It's important because it sends us signals and messages of where we need to be and what we need to change and what areas we need to work on. And within that, this book, it also talks about, in the Bible, it talks about the body of Christ, how we're all one. right? We need the leaders, we need the teachers, we need the helpers, we need all these people that work together in forming the whole body of the world, and how we all work together and how we're all important and how it's all necessary. You need to think about like the actual physical body. You know, if you sever an arm, if you sever your leg, if you sever something from your body, it's not going to work. And it's the same thing moving on in the world, is realizing that every aspect is needed, it's necessary, and we all have an ability to work together and create the change we want. And all the differences and all these opportunities are necessary, but we just have to realize that we're all connected, just like we're all connected to nature, because we are nature. It's, I don't know, it's a big conversation. Now I'm rambling because I made so many notes and I was trying to link it all back together, because I was like, there's so much wisdom and in what you're saying. But I mean, this could go on for a long time, and I know we're running out of time as it is.
I think it will. When I come to Canada, I have a lot I'd like to talk about. I hope I can articulate what I'm trying to get across, but then we will have different lenses of perception. But if you're watching and you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do the inner work, because it can be scary to take responsibility, I can assure you it's perfectly safe. It's like taking off a tight shoe. You feel much better after you've done it. It feels good. And it's this empowerment within you, like, okay, well, I don't need to blame anyone else. I really don't. And that doesn't mean to say you don't speak up. You listen to your inner wisdom. And if I'm triggered by something, I will never respond until I feel aligned. If I have any sort of anxiety or anything going on here, I'm like, wait until you're swimming downstream. And then when you do speak, the words kind of just flow as you intend. And the thing is, right, it's really easy to act enlightened when everyone around you is behaving exactly how you want. But it's in the moment when you have this challenge, and maybe the universal intelligence and God is going, have you dealt with this yet? And if you ignore it, it will keep knocking at your door. I used to have a terrible fear of being woken up because I didn't have a particularly safe childhood. So I thought it was normal to wake up with a racing heart. That's how awful it was. And then Dottie, my daughter, came along and she wouldn't sleep. And because I had ignored all that horrible feeling before of, oh, it's really dangerous to be woken up, something bad's going to happen, my daughter went, are you going to deal with this yet? I will keep waking up every 20 minutes. And my partner said something to me that was so poignant but so simple. He said, all you need to say to yourself when she's making all this noise and waking you up is say, this is happening right now. That was it. And in order to do that inner work, you have to feel safe. And I did feel safe. I thought, no one's hurting me. I'm safe now. Listen to what your daughter's telling you. It's almost like we had like a joint healing, that it's okay to stay asleep and nothing's gonna happen. But it wasn't easy at first. I was angry. I was like, why do you keep doing this to me? My first one was slept beautifully, but I realized because I haven't learned that lesson yet. That's why. Now she sleeps fine. But it's not about a black and white thing, you know. When it comes to birth, especially, or hospital or home, because let's be real, right? A woman can do all the preparation she wants and informs herself, and she can have a tragedy at a home birth. But the same can happen at hospital. But again, it's that attachment to an outcome. I'm not trying to say you can't grieve. That's rubbish. You need to feel your human feelings. But trying to control the outcome by all this external stuff is not enough. That's why I think it's dangerous to go out there and say to women, you should have your own birth, it's safe. Well, what if that woman hasn't done the internal work and she's operating on a really, really fearful level? Of course, that's going to perpetuate problems. What if that woman hasn't heard your words as you intended? What if it's been interpreted differently? That's why it's dangerous to just give this outside level stuff. And that's why it's most important to say to a woman, you do know you have a choice, right? Because women call me all the time, what do you think I should free birth? I'm like, if you don't know the answer to that, my answer is of little help. I'm not here to give you answers. There's already a system that does that, and I don't want any part of it. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do, because don't we lose a lot if someone tells you what to do? You lose part of your journey, you lose part of the getting to know you stage, but rather we give tools, right?
Yeah.
I think it is an empowering journey. It's a difficult one, and here's the beauty: you don't need to take it. You can still carry on doing what you're doing. There's no need to feel pressure. You're on a particular journey. We would never judge an 18-month-old to keep falling over. You can't walk yet, you shit. No, that doesn't happen, because babies will walk when they're ready to walk. And if someone's not on that journey yet, who are we to judge them? And it's not a competition. You know, I just feel, do you know what people need? Love. That's it.
Love.
Like, when you look at the top and the bottom of it, that's all they need. They need to feel safe and loved and wise. When people do my courses, I have a little wristband, and it has on it, I'm safe, I'm loved, I'm wise. That's the mantra. If you want to do any inner work, any light work, that's all you need to know. You just need to feel loved. That will be a very short talk in Canada. You got to feel loved. Okay, see you later.
No, but there's so much in that I can't wait. So Nikita is coming to the Reclaiming Birth Conference in September, and she even helped me, in a very brief conversation, just remind me to come from a place of not having the attachment on the outcome, but remember the intention that was behind the conference, and surrendering to that intention of what we want to create, because this is just the beginning. This is just the start, and we want to bring people in like Nikita and share this very, very important message, because we know this is not just an event. This is a movement, and this is going to change generations to come as we keep having these stories, if we keep doing the inner work, if we keep sharing and learning and knowing that there's choice, and coming into our body, changing our hearts, and coming from a place of love. And I think it's so important, and I can't wait for September 20th, 21st. I know I'm going to try and wrap this up now, because there's so much we can continue to go on and talk about. But if you're enjoying this conversation, make sure you're following Nikita at When Push Comes to Shove. Make sure to share this out, share any post, share a post about Reclaiming Birth Conference. And yeah, we're both speaking in London, Canada, London, England. I think that's kind of cool. And and just help us get the word out. We're still looking for sponsorship opportunities. There's vendor opportunities, and help share just the conference ticket sales, and just spreading the message that we just want to see a change in the narrative and changing the stories. Because I think that's one of the most important things we can do, is come from a place of love, knowing that we have choice, and knowing that we have the ability of taking control in our own hearts and moving that forward. So you have said so much important, like, wisdom in this very short amount of time, that I cannot wait to hear what you're going to share with everyone in just a few short months. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming here, and thank you everyone for joining in. I don't know if you have any last words you want to share, or...
I'm just really excited, and I feel honored to be invited to such a profound movement in Canada, to come across the pond and do it. It's like, means the world to me. And thank you so much for your support, for your love, for your wisdom. Thank you. And I really look forward to talking in September. And who knows what I'll say. I'll wait. I'll wait. See what comes out of my mouth. I don't ever plan anything. I don't. I just talk and hope for the best.
Yeah. That's when I started first speaking out, I had scripted pages that I would just stare at and read word for word. And then as I got more comfortable and knew, and just just the messages came through, and I was right before I was just whatever needs to come through at this time, I know is what meant to be. And then I would get off the stage and be like, what did I say? I hope that was okay. I don't even know what came out. So I kind of understand that. And every time you speak, it's exactly what is needed, and it's important. And I can't wait to continue to have more conversations with you and see what you share in September. So thank you everyone for joining in this morning. Please help us share this, and tune in again. We'll have to have another conversation closer to Nikita. Thank you so much. I'm just so grateful that we're connected.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.